When I look up at the sky at night, I see 100 billion stars of the Milky Way galaxy. They look like lights in cabins of a giant spaceship, the Milky Way, sailing through space. And I wonder if there are other passengers in those cabins.
Avi Loeb is an Israeli-American theoretical physicist and cosmologist, best known for his work on black holes, the early universe, and the search for extraterrestrial life.
There are 100 billion of them, comparable to the number of people who ever lived on Earth. It would be arrogant to think otherwise, that we are alone, that we are unique and special. Especially if you read the news every day, we are not the pinnacle of creation. There is room for improvement.
He is a professor at Harvard University, where he serves as the Frank B. Baird Jr. Professor of Science.
I'm just a curious farm boy, and I wonder about the world around me. And I hate to behave like the adults in the room, because they often pretend to know more than we actually know. And that bothered me since I was a young kid. And so I decided to become a scientist and answer the questions based on evidence, not based on prejudice.
Loeb has authored numerous scientific papers and several books, including Extraterrestrial, the first sign of intelligent life beyond Earth, where he argues that the interstellar object Oumuamua, detected in 2017, might be evidence of alien technology.
The first object to have been reported by astronomers that came from outside the solar system looked really weird. It was discovered by a telescope in Hawaii. When it passed close to Earth, it was the size of a football field. What you see behind me is the artist's depiction. It looked really weird because as it was tumbling every 8 hours, the amount of sunlight reflected from it changed by a factor of 10, which meant that it has a very extreme shape, most likely flat, like a pancake. And moreover, it exhibited a push away from the sun by some mysterious force because there was no evaporation, no cometary tail around it, no dust, no gas. So the question was, what is pushing it?
His bold hypothesis and willingness to challenge conventional thinking have made him a prominent and sometimes controversial figure in the scientific community.
And for 70 years, we've been searching for radio signals. This is equivalent to staying at home and waiting for a phone call that may never come.
He also leads the Galileo Project, an initiative to systematically search for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence.
I enjoy nature. Whatever it brings to our doorstep is welcome. So let's just look around.
All right, betters, look who I have in the house, Professor Avi Loeb. Professor, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure.
You may not remember, but I've actually interviewed before on the show. I had a different background. It was a long time ago. It was the very first interview I did on Vetted on my channel, and I've since grown the channel pretty big here in the community, and I'm really excited. And I always refer back to our very first interview. And I know you've done a million of them, so you probably don't remember, but for me, it was amazing. So I just thank you again for taking the time to come on here. I think the Vetted community is going to be really excited to hear from you. So yeah,
well, it's great to see you again, and a lot has happened since then. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, yeah, the last time I spoke to you, you hadn't gone out to Papua New Guinea. You were making all these plans to go all this stuff, and I covered everything that you did after all of that stuff came out. But you know, before this interview started, I was thinking, I always like to start with an interesting question. And I thought, how do you feel? Okay, this is the best way. Do you regret at all taking the stance you did with Oumuamua that started you on this journey of sort of being part of the UAP community and doing more research into it? Is there any part of you that regrets that?
No, not at all. In fact, it makes my life far more interesting because we have the Galileo Project with 3 additional observatories being planned for the near future. We have the expedition materials that we recovered that we are still analyzing, looking for isotopes. There will be the Rubin Observatory coming in Chile this year and providing us with additional objects like Oumuamua. And I think all of these are exciting because they might provide us with new knowledge about what happens outside the solar system. And, before that, the subject did not rise up to the attention of the public, of the academic community, because we didn't have examples of interstellar objects from outside the solar system. And the traditional way of searching for extraterrestrial civilizations was to wait for radio signals. And that's just like waiting for a phone call at home. If you feel lonely, that's not a very good approach to finding a partner, just waiting for them to call you. When Enrico Fermi said, where is everybody? That's a question that every lonely person asks. And
Sure.
what you tell the person is, that you shouldn't be so pretentious. You shouldn't assume that you are so attractive that everyone will come to you. You should actually search for partners and at the very least look through the windows of your home to see if you have neighbors, or maybe even go outside and look for dating sites. And the point is that Enrico Fermi never constructed a telescope. So for me personally, it opened a new exciting frontier for research, trying to look for objects near the Earth that might be of extraterrestrial technological origin. And that's exciting. And Oumuamua opened my eyes to that opportunity, because before that, we didn't know of any objects that came into the solar system. And moreover, this one was very weird. And of course, what you alluded to is that there is a lot of pushback and people are attacking me personally, but that doesn't affect me, because, it's always the case when you have, you're on the quest for something very significant, that people are either jealous of the attention that this search gets, or they have a prejudice and therefore they don't want it to be disrupted by evidence. And we've seen that throughout human history. There's nothing new about it. For me, the exciting aspect is that we have the opportunity now to look for that evidence. And, I'm actually very fortunate to have analyzed Oumuamua in a way that is different than the rest of the scientific community. Because I'll give you another example. There are objects that behave like Oumuamua. They seem to have some additional force acting on them without showing any evidence for cometary evaporation. And my colleagues are calling them, as of recently, dark comets, meaning it's a comet because it's being pushed, but we don't see a cometary tail, so it's dark. And, it's just like calling a koala a monkey without a tail. In this case, it could be a spacecraft. And in fact, there was one such object like that my colleagues on the 2nd of January 2025, they noticed an object near Earth, and they gave it a name as a near Earth object, an asteroid. And turns out that, like 17 hours later, they realized, oh no, this one has the orbital parameters of the Tesla Roadster car that was launched by SpaceX. And so it's not an asteroid, so they retracted that. And the same happened after Oumuamua was discovered. 3 years later, there was another object that was discovered by the same telescope in Hawaii. It was pushed away from the sun by reflecting sunlight, exactly the same as I argued Oumuamua did. And this one ended up being identified as a rocket booster from a launch in 1966. And,
wow.
and so there is this tendency of astronomers to look at objects in the sky and always say it's a rock of a type that we've never seen before.
Yeah.
And my point is, we should be open-minded. Around Earth, there is a whole class of objects called empty trash bag objects. These are objects being pushed by reflecting sunlight, and everyone discards them and says, all the astronomers says, even if they behave in a strange way and do some zigzag motion, they say, well, it's being pushed by reflecting sunlight. We don't care about it. It's a broken piece of a satellite. so we call it an empty trash bag object and forget about it. However, when you see Oumuamua behaving as if sunlight is pushing it, no, this is a rock of a type that is very different from what we've seen before, maybe a hydrogen iceberg, maybe a nitrogen iceberg. And I say that's not a honest approach. If you allow one explanation for objects near Earth that are definitely behaving like UAP, you should also allow the same interpretation to other objects that came into the solar system from outside, because if we produce space trash, other civilizations could have done the same.
Sure.
So to answer your question, I'm actually much more excited about this subject now, despite the pushback, just because that's the scientific way of approaching anomalies. You see something unusual, you try to figure it out. Whereas my colleagues are, they stick to the notion that we should always interpret it in a way that is not consequential. If it's near Earth, it's human-made debris. If it's from outside the solar system, it must be a rock of a type that we've never seen before. And that's not a honest way of approaching anomalies.